Former President Trump, he did call into my radio show to react to today's ruling. Here's part of what he said.
It was a great decision. We're very honored by it. And it basically said you have to win by getting the votes as opposed to some other way. And that's really what we wanted. And it was a very powerful decision, very well crafted and very well respected, I must say.
All right, here with more on today's Supreme Court ruling, former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is with us. Let's get your initial reaction, sir.
Look, this is a case about national unity, and I think the Supreme Court absolutely ruled in the right way, answering the question, really, are we one nation or not? The Supreme Court held yes, because the heart of the decision was about whether we can have a patchwork framework where certain states decide who's on the ballot, other states decide a different person's on the ballot for U.S. president. That doesn't work if we're one nation. So that's what this case was really about. I thought President Trump did a great job in that press conference and that discussion he held afterwards. Speaking about national unity, I think that's the heart of this case. I was with President Trump earlier today, and I do think that this is not just about President Trump, but about the future unity of our country itself. And the Supreme Court 9-0 came down on the right side of that question. And I do think that's a step forward, Sean. I don't think this should have ever gone to the Supreme Court. But the fact that it is shows how far we've fallen. But at the same time, the fact that they came out on the right side of it unanimously is a good step for this country.
What did you make in the concurring opinions of the three liberal justices and also that of Amy Coney Barrett, who said the court has settled a politically charged issue in the volatile season of a presidential election? Quote, particularly in this circumstance, writings on the court should turn the national temperature down, not up. For present purposes, our differences are far less important than unanimity in this case. All 9 justices agree that on the outcome of this case. That is the message Americans should take home. That was a pretty, usually justices will not acknowledge political circumstances surrounding a particular case. She did go there. Your reaction to that?
I think Amy Coney Barrett's actual one-page concurrence was useful. Now, if you want to go a layer deeper, Sean, and you're asking about this, what do I see in that concurrence? What you actually see is they said, OK, the states can't do this, but the federal government could do it, even actors in the federal government outside of Congress. So you want to read the subtext of this. What I think is happening is the court is buying themselves some political latitude to say there's going to be other Trump-related cases that come before the Supreme Court now. So what you see from the liberal justices is saying that 3 of them did swing over for a 9-0 unanimous ruling here. But they say other actors in the federal government, even outside of Congress, could have had that authority anyway. I think they're buying themselves some leash for going in a different direction in some of those other cases, including the presidential immunity case now making its way up to the Supreme Court next month as well. So that's what I think is actually going on. And the Roberts Court in particular, more than any court in modern history, Sean, is really concerned with perceptions of its institutional legitimacy. So while I do think today was an outstanding outcome, it was the right outcome for justice and for this country and for national unity, 9-0, I think that dissent, or it wasn't a dissent, it was a concurrence by the 3 liberal justices, plants the seeds for them potentially going a different way in future cases that are coming down the pike.
How dangerous, Democrats as a part of their strategy, I think they'll talk about January 6th and Trump is evil, abortion, and the obvious book that they always use, the Democratic Party, Republicans are racist and sexist and homophobic, and the list goes on. I've mentioned it many, many times. But when you actually look at the heart of this, what would the result be if, in fact, we have one politician having the power to just unilaterally, for whatever reason, declare a candidate ineligible to be on a ballot? What are the long-term consequences of this?
The long-term consequence is undoing what we set this country into motion in 1776. That's a monarchy, not a democracy, where one autocrat, one monarch, one individual gets to decide who the people can and cannot elect. And 250 years ago, Sean, we had our founding fathers who fought a revolution to say that for better or worse, we the people decide who governs. We the people settle our differences at the ballot box, able to vote for whoever we want, where every person has a voice and a vote in that democratic process. If America means anything, that's what it was founded on. That is what makes America great. That is what makes America itself. So what is at stake, you ask? I think it is our national identity itself. That is who we are. That's what the Supreme Court came down on the right side of today. And I think President Trump gave one of the great speeches we've seen in a long time, solidifying that decision with the right tenor to say that this isn't about him. This is about the future unity of our country. That's what's at stake, and I think that's where the Supreme Court came down today.
Imagine one elected official can declare somebody guilty of insurrection, a charge that was never even made against President Trump, let alone a conviction. Pretty scary scenario, in my view. Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you as always. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.